Good. We are ready to go. Okay, Stan, you're on.
Okay, thank you very much for inviting me to do this. I've been Christmas seal collecting for about 50 years. And I drifted into it because I ran into a dead end in stamp collecting. And so this was a promising alternative. And I didn't realize what a challenge it was going to turn out to be. But over the last 50 years, I have very definitely been able to uncover some rarities, and I'd like to share those with you tonight. Okay, I'll just advance, Paul. I'm going to show you where Christmas seals began. They began in Denmark in 1904. A lesser known fact is Swedish seals were almost immediately available in 1904 as well. The presentation has to do with Red Cross seals. And those of you who are familiar with it, these are the seals that were issued with a Red Cross on them between the years 1907 and 1919 in this country. I'm going to show you a very attractive collectible area that is a local charity, and then I'll share some other national charities. I have a fairly large holding of all of these. Here's the first Danish seal.
Okay.
That is the seal that was designed and used in 1904 in Denmark. And this page that's over here, I realize you can't read it. It came out of the collection when I showed it at Alapex. And I won a Vermeil small gold for the collection. But this was a page that described what the history was and showed the first seal. Go ahead, Paul. Now, this is a very fine cover that I found in Canada. And I've had this for about, I'm going to say about 15 years. But you can see it has two tied 1904 Danish seals on it. And it was mailed in 1905, but it's still very collectible. They're both tied. And that's something I want to bring your attention to. Seal collectors want to see the seal tied, because when the seal is tied to the cover, it represents legitimate usage. And we're all very interested in legitimately used seals. And the only way to guarantee that, of course, is to see the seal tied on the card. And so this is an example of tied seals. You may not find one as fine as this one, but this is an example of that. Okay, Paul. These are this is lesser known. That's Swedish. If we could back up.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Sweden followed suit almost immediately with their own seals. And I have a fairly complete collection of those. They began in 1904 also. And that is the first Swedish Christmas seal in 1904. I've only just shown a portion of the first page that came out of my collection. Okay. This is the first US seal. This one was designed by Emily P. Bissell and used in the Delaware Valley. A lot of people feel that this seal should be actually a local because its distribution and its circulation was almost exclusively in the Delaware Valley. It is very, very difficult to find seals from the first issue that are canceled on the card and tied to it. This one is one that I bought at auction years ago. That's a Booth envelope that's here. When they set up the sale of the seals, they did this in post offices. They gave them a a spot and someone dressed as a nurse came and sold the seals for a penny a piece.
Because in the hospital. Because M&P Bissell was a hospital.
Yeah. This one is one I did find myself. Emily Bissell discovered that, or found that the seals were beginning to gain interest and beginning to gain use. So what she did is she tried to extend the campaign. And the way she extended it is she put Happy New Year on the bottom of the seal, changed the design to Merry Christmas and then Happy New Year. And that's how she extended the sale. These are much scarcer. This is WX2 or 19.7 type 2. This is much scarcer than the 19.7 that I showed you, which was tied with the first seal, because they had limited distribution. Let's go to the next one. Anytime that you have a scarce collectible and it's a cheap seal or stamp and the difference is canceling it, you're going to find frauds. That is an example of a fraud where somebody tried to mail this and pass it off as 19.7, and you can see that the 7 is way off on the date. So that's a fraud. The stamp that's on the top was a year-round seal that Emily Bissell designed and attempted to use. It wasn't very successful, and very few of these exist. That is an example of a year-round seal. It was released in 1908, but it didn't go, and it wasn't very successful, and only a few copies are left. Greg suggested that I put this in there. It is a page out of one of my collections that shows the difference between WX1 and WX2, and you can see very clearly Merry Christmas on WX1 and Merry Christmas, Happy New Year on WX2. And the reason that I brought this is what I'm about to show you is the rarest thing ever discovered. It's called the Layman cover. And if we could advance that one, Paul. I don't own this. This is the scarcest 19.7, probably the scarcest Christmas seal related card that has ever been found. This card was mailed from the US to Amsterdam, and it has canceled on it both WX1 and WX2. And it is without a doubt the most prodigiously rare Christmas seal collectible that's been discovered to date. And what makes the story even more interesting is it does not reside in a seal collector's collection. It resides in the collection of a person who specializes in that 2-cent definitive Washington stamp. He bought that bid for it, and I believe he paid, I think it cost about $6,000. And it resides in an exhibit which has won numerous awards. I know that he won some gold medal or gold award in Michigan, I think is where it was. And that's the first time anybody saw this seal. But it does not reside in a Christmas seal collection. It resides in a collection that's devoted to that 2-cent definitive. And then Greg suggested that I ought to show you this. This is my Layman cover. I discovered this years ago. And this is an Emily P. Bissell first day cover on which somebody put the first 2 seals on it and had it canceled in Wilmington. That's as close to that as I'm ever going to get. But I've had it for, I don't know, quite a few years. This is the first truly national campaign. This was designed by Howard Pyle, who was lived in Chad's Ford. He was part of that group of artists and illustrators. He designed this seal, and it was designed to be used nationally. And what that opened up is an enormous number of variations. Variations in gum, variations in design. There are two distinct designs, one with rounded corners on the frame and the other one with square corners on the frame. But then there were numerous variations of that occur. And I'll share a couple of those with you. Go ahead, Paul. This is the second design. This is the frame with rounded corners. This is type 2 of 1908. And there are it's a collecting interest in itself. There are people within the Christmas Seal and Charity Stamp Society that don't collect anything but 1908, and they'll never find it all. There's just so much of it out there, and it's so scarce, you're never, ever going to be able to find it all. I'll show you a couple of examples right now of how difficult it is to find them and what some of the really scarce items look like. These two cards, when you look at it the naked eye, you don't see how really scarce they are. The bottom one has the seal rouletted. It's a very scarce local issue from the West Coast. I believe this one is canceled in Oregon. This one is probably even rarer. The top one is probably even rarer than the rouletted one. That one is perforated 12 by 14. Now, I don't know how that happened, but it is a very, very rare issue. And there were a lot of things that were done in the printing of these that made it just different varieties, many different varieties. I mentioned different gum. There are different perforations. Some are rouletted. I've even heard of, I've never seen it, but I've even heard of one that was perforated and rouletted. Just endless number of varieties and cards and covers that you could find. These two are legitimately used examples of almost the scarcest of the varieties of 1908. 1909 is a year, it's the third year of Christmas seals. There isn't anything spectacular about it. I show two things here. One is a local where they overprinted the seal, New Hampshire. So I think that what they tried to do, and they got permission from the Red Cross to do it, is to divert some of the funds to the local charity as opposed to the national charity. And then here is one of the reasons why postal regulations were changed. It's a Christmas seal that was passed for postage in 1909. A lot of people didn't know. Emily Bissell tried to explain to them that you don't do this. And if you look at that, if you get this presentation and you look at that booth envelope, it says, this will not carry mail, but it can be carried on any mail, or something to that effect. And this one is an example of what the postal regulation, why the postal regulations were changed. 1909 is a fairly common year, but that cover is very uncommon. Okay, Paul. 1910 is a fairly common year. It's you find a lot of different covers. I have quite a few of them. I'll show you just a couple that came out of my collection. I heard recently that there is an example of this that is rouletted. For some reason, it got rouletted in one direction and it's perforated. And that's a very scarce variety. I've never seen it. I've heard about it, but I've never seen it. Go ahead, Paul. Here's a card. If we go back, there's a card with 2 seals on it, tied, and another example of a card that's sealed. Very attractive covers. Okay, Paul. This is another very unusual year, 1911. The seals, even the common seals, are fairly scarce and have a high catalog value. What's shown here are the seals that are actually listed in the Scott catalog. Type 1, Type 2, there's a design change for Type 2. You can see it. The frame is a little thinner. The shading on the house is different. Type 3 is a coil, and it didn't catch on. And so what's known about it is they think only 1 roll of 1,000 of the Type 3 seals ever got out into circulation. So they're very, very rare, much rarer than the catalog value, which I looked at. I thought it was about $50. They're much scarcer than that. You go move ahead. This is a coil pair, and the reason I put it in there is obviously that's even scarcer than the single by quite a bit. It's very difficult to find. I stumbled across it on eBay and got it. Now, there are 5 types. The Scott catalog only lists 3 of the types, but there are 5 known types of 1911. This seal here that's on this card is one of only about 30 or 40 copies that are known to exist. This is a really scarce, privately prepared seal, I think on the West Coast, and I'm not sure where it is, but I think it's canceled somewhere in California. This seal was privately prepared. It's rouletted. It's a very, very rare seal that is not listed by Scott. I don't know why they don't list it, but they don't. But this is an example of one of the scarcer varieties that showed up of 1911. I saw this once. This one is not tied. I saw this once for sale at an auction, and I probably was out of the bidding in 5 minutes. I think it brought about $1,000, and I was just not willing to spend that kind of money to get it. But I did once see one of those. They're very rare. There is a 5th type, and if we look at the next one, I obviously don't have this 5th type. It was reported by the Christmas Shield and Charity Stamp Society. It's a rare coil, and some of these kind of scarce coils showed up in that generation of postage stamps too. But this one was released in 1911, and hardly any of them exist. They only reside in the most extensive collections by the most successful collectors. This came off the cover of the Christmas Seal and Charity Stamp Society newsletter, and that's what Type 5 looks like. And Scott does not list Type 5 either. Here are 2 cards with tied Type 1 seals on them. I didn't put this in this presentation, but I have a Type 2 that's tied also to a card. It's very rare to find them. It's very difficult to find them. But I have another one. I did not put it in this presentation. I took it out because the presentation is pretty long, so I just left it out. Okay, the 1912 seal, there are not very many varieties of this, and there aren't very many scarce items connected with it. There are some covers. Here's a nice cover with 2 seals on it. One of them is tied. If you look on the next slide, Here's somebody who put 5 1912 seals on it. Only one of them got tied. If that person had the connections I now have with the Odessa post office, I could have gotten that tied for her, but in that generation, that probably didn't happen. They're two pretty nice ones. I thought that the one that had 5 copies of the 1912 seal on it was certainly an interesting cover, and I let that be part of this presentation. Now we get to something else. What you're looking at the top is a copy of 1913 Type 1. Now, it is estimated that only 1 sheet of 100 of these ever got out into circulation. And why did it get out into circulation is, I don't know how it got out there. Somebody who was on the committee to evaluate the design, and they evaluated several variants of the design, and I have some essays in this collection that I'll show you. But this is a genuine Type 1. And I hunted for years to find that seal. It shouldn't even be listed in Scott as a seal. It's an essay. It was never used. No one has ever seen a copy of that on a tied to a cover used. No, I don't think anybody's ever seen a copy of that put on a cover, because if you had it, why would you do that with it? It certainly isn't going to pass as legitimate. But that is a copy of Type 1 1913. The adopted designs are Type 1 and Type 3. Type 2 and Type 3. Type 2 has green circles around the Red Cross, and in Type 3, that's been removed. This is a local using the same design. That's from the Chicago Heart Association. Go ahead, Paul. That's an example of one of the essays. A lot of these essays got out into circulation as well, but they weren't perforated. So somehow they saw Type 1 and they said it's perforated. That must mean it's the real thing. It should not be. It should not have made it out of the office where it was being evaluated. The design was being evaluated, because it's just trouble for collectors who want to try to find it. It's impossible to find. It took me years to find it. Those are examples of Type 2 and Type 3. Covers, they're hard to find. 1913 is a tough year. Here's another essay. All the essays have got some variant of poinsettia leaves on the frame. Those were removed, and the adopted design is this one. That is the adopted Type 3 design. It's very, very difficult to find Type 2 with the green circles on it actually used and tied to a cover. And then you look at the next. These are again examples. They're just very attractive covers that I managed to find. They're tied. The next thing is the thing that I think is really. Here is a. Go forward one, Paul. Here is something I stumbled across in a flea market. This is a blotter. They started to issue, when they realized they could get some visibility for seals and market them in different ways, they started to put them on all kinds of things. They put them on bus passes. They put them on train tickets. They put them on, I've seen them on what they used to sell on milk bottles. It was a collar that would go around. They put a Christmas seal on that collar. Well, here's a blotter. And what did they put on it? They put one of the essays. You can see the essay there. The poinsettia leaves do not show up on any of the legitimately released seals. They don't show up. They only show up on essays. So he speculated, why, if you're going to put this blotter, would you take that seal instead of one of the release seals? It's a very interesting thing. It's kind of messed up, but you can see what it was.
Do you know anything about the signature?
No,
Okay.
I don't know. All it was is I walked around the flea market. This happened to catch my eye. I picked it up. You don't pay for anything much in the flea market, so I don't know what I paid for this, but it wasn't much.
Nice item.
It is a nice item. It's really a scarce item. 1914 doesn't have much interesting seals connected to it, but there is something, an essay. When I bought that at auction, it was listed as a block of 4 of the 1914 seal that the person selling it didn't realize. And I didn't realize what I had bought until it arrived, and it wasn't the 1914 seal. It was an essay of the 1914, which is larger. They didn't adopt that design. So there are some interesting cards and covers, and I have a number of those as well. I picked this one. It's very clean. Here are 2 more very clean tied. As I pointed out, tying the seal to it is the most important aspect of it. That if the seal is off on some other side, then you can't justify that it is legitimate usage. And legitimate usage is what seal collectors value. Okay, Paul. There are a lot of variants that show up, errors. This is the 1915 seal. There's a color error on the right, and then there's a perforation error down below. This one is imperforate vertically. That's an error. This is a color error. That seal on the left is a legitimate 1915 seal. Okay. Here are 2 that are tied. Go back one. Here are 2 cards. They're tied. One with a commemorative for the Balboa exhibit. This one's actually canceled in San Francisco. And the other one is just a tied seal. They were placed right. They were canceled. Okay, Paul. There are a number of variants to the 1916 seals. These are the 3 variants that are listed: perf 12, perf 12 by 12 and a half, and perf 12 and a half by 12 are there. They are WX18, 18A, and 18B. There's a block. What's down here at the bottom, which is a very attractive card, that is a window card. What they did in those days is, if you'd already paid for the seals that they sent you, or you'd already purchased them, you put this window card in the window, and that indicates that you have bought and paid for the seals, so no one's going to trouble you trying to sell you more of them. And that's what that is. That's a window card. '16 is a very interesting go back and pick up those 2, Paul. Yeah, 1916 attractive covers. I sent Paul and Bob something the other day that I found. I found a strange collectible, and I shared it with them, and I'm willing to share it with anybody else. It is some kind of it was just something to hang that was collectible. It was a 1916 cover in which the date was changed on the seal from 1916 to 1901. And then they wanted to tie the seal to the cover. So what they did is they put a 1908 cancellation on it. And then I looked at the reverse side and I found that it was made in China. And I guess that's enough said. But what I think the reason they changed the date is that way they could avoid copyright infringement. So they changed the design. It's just a bizarre collectible. I have a lot of bizarre collectibles. 1917, here's I can remember finding this. I found this in Manayunk in an antique shop. It has 3 of them tied, but 3 seals, but 1 of them's tied. It's just a very nice card. There aren't very many variants of 1917. There are imperfect pairs. That imperfect pair is just a proof pair. And those are around. You can find proof pairs. You can find progressive color proofs. You can find a lot of interesting collectible items. All I have of this is an imperfect pair. 1918 is a very interesting year. This was the end of World War I. And this charity was devoted really to raising money for tuberculosis research. But what was happening is men were coming back in 1918 from World War I. So what happened is they didn't want to compete and compete with that charity that was raising money to help the soldiers returning from World War I. So they didn't release very many full sheets. It is almost impossible to find a 1918 that's fully perforated. Almost all of them come out of booklet panes like this. Here is a booklet pane of the 1918 Type 1 WX21D. There's a full pane. There's a seal from it. If you look at the next slide, here is the second one. This is Type 2. This one, I believe, is rouletted by perforated. And you can find those. There's a pair of them. Came out of the bottom of one of these booklet panes. And then if you go to the next, there is an essay that was listed in Scott. It's no longer listed. That is a third type of this. It wasn't adopted, but it has wide circulation and it is perforated. So Scott listed it. It is a Type 3, and then I have an imperfect pair. I think that's a proof pair of the Type 1 seal. And then this is the charity, I believe, that the Tuberculosis Association didn't want to compete with. This is the charity that was raising money for the soldiers returning after World War I. And so I found actually one of these seals used and tied to the cover. There was a card dealer in Birmingham, and I had a lot of connection with him, and he sold me that one. He said it's the only one he's ever seen. It's the only one I've ever seen of that. It's used. There are the seals themselves, and you can find them perforated and you can find them imperforated. But that's the reason why you can't find a 1918 fully perforated, is they backed away from that sale and didn't want to compete with this charity. Here is 1919. There are 2 types, slight design change. Very interesting. What's really interesting about this is this is the last year that the Red Cross appeared on a seal. And it's the first year that the double-barred cross of Lorraine appeared on a seal. And there are two design types there. There's a little tail on the Santa hat for type 2, or type 2 has this little tail on the top, and it's a slight design change. But this is the first year the double-bar cross of Lorraine appears, and it is the last year that a red cross appears on the seal. Go ahead, Paul. Here's an imperforate pair of type 2, and then this is an experimental envelope. This didn't make it very well either. So there aren't very many of these around. But what they did is they printed the seal on the envelope. You bought the envelope, and that paid for part of the charity as well. But that didn't work out very much. Go ahead, Paul. Type 1 and type 2 tied on cards. They're hard to find. Go ahead, Paul. Here is, I put this in because I think it is a really attractive local seal, and it gives you an idea of how difficult some of these things are going to be. If you restrict your attention, you run into a roadblock and can't collect any more of the national seals, or they're not worth collecting anymore. You find another collecting interest, and one of the collecting interests is to look at local charities. Here's a very attractive local charity that was in New Orleans, the New Orleans Tuberculosis Hospital. This is a complete collection of them. They started in 1924 and they ended in 1940. Now, when you collect these, it's very, very hard to find them used because they were used locally. So if you don't live in that area, it's going to be very hard to find any of the covers. And if you look at the next slide, over the years, I found two. I traded for one, and one I bought at auction. This one is 1926. This one is 1939. They're very hard to find used. And I've only, in all the years I've been doing, only found two. Those are my two that I have. There are seals that are national. They're private. They're private charities, but they reach national prominence. This is a complete collection of Lutheran Sanatorium Wheat Ridge. It's a very popular charity. That seal that's up at the top is a horrible example of it. You'll never find a worse copy than that one. This is the first release seal in 1910. That's the best I've been able to do. It gets really pricey when they're in good condition. So I have a horrible one, but it does give you an idea of what they looked like. They were sold in booklet panes. They were sold in sheets. And sometimes you find them, you can see here, I've collected something that came out of a booklet pane and something that came out of a sheet. So you have different types that you can look at regarding these. And if you go further, I'll show you an error. The bottom one down there, this is an error. It missed the frame. Cut, somehow released without the frame being printed on it, and that is an error. And this is complete up to that year of Wheat Ridge. Then there is another charity that's connected with the Lutherans, Grace Lutheran Sanatorium, and that one is in San Antonio. And it begins in 1915. And this is a collection that is complete up to if you go to the next one, up to this year, this last year, after I got to that point, I didn't collect any more of them. After I got it complete up to this time, I think they're still releasing these, but I don't know. Okay. Now, I put these on as a teaser. Paul suggested that I might show you about some of these more restrictive and narrow collecting interests. Well, here you begin to see some of the things that happened afterwards. When postal regulations were introduced and they said you couldn't put seals on the cover, on the front of a cover, because it was confusing the clerks and they couldn't tell the difference between the seals and the stamps, and the seals were getting canceled. And I have a number, that's one of my collecting interests, so I'll show you some later that where seals were used as postage. These are two covers that come out of my collection that are really just nice, very attractive covers. That's, other than errors, that's probably the only thing left to collect. The seals themselves don't command any value at all. After you get past about 1950, they're just valueless. So what you're looking at are just very collectible covers, and these are two examples of very collectible covers. One was an event cover, and the other one is canceled on Christmas Day. That's a collecting interest, and I will show you on a later date some canceled on Christmas Day collectibles. And with that, I'd be happy to try to answer any questions.
Well, thank you very much, Stanley. Looks at, what year did they put the change in that you could not put the stamps on the front? And then when did they recede?
I think it's in the 20s.
The
I
20s.
think after about 1925, I forget exactly when they did it, but that's when things get really scarce. That's when it's really hard to find a seal canceled on the front of a cover next to a stamp, which is the desirable way to find it.
Yeah.
It was very interesting because in the kickoff for seals, they have first day covers, what they call first day covers. They're not the first usage of the seal, but it's done in Santa Claus, Indiana. And Santa Claus, a Christmas city or a Christmas town, that has an obvious connection to Christmas. And so they started issuing what they called first day covers. Well, the postal clerks wouldn't let you put the seal on the front, and they wouldn't cancel them if you did. And there was an argument that ensued about this. Well, if I'm handing you the cover and the postage is paid and you're not going to process this, why is it that you can't cancel the cover? Well, that argument ensued, and some people won that argument. And in the early 30s, there are some Santa Claus, Indiana first day covers. I don't have any of those. I think the earliest one that I have is 1937. But I have heard that they go back as far as 1932 as the release time. And I think collectors finally argued them into a position where they couldn't possibly justify not canceling it, because if they canceled and handed it back to them, they weren't processing the cover any longer. So the postage wasn't being used for anything. And I think they won that argument, and there are a bunch of first day covers, and I have quite a few.
Somebody in the higher ups decided they could make money that way.
Oh yeah, I'm sure if you look at it, and you can always trace something to a monetary value.
Mm-hmm. What year did our
1908.
go ahead? You have to unmute.
I think he is muted, isn't he? Yes, there
Vince, you have to
were.
unmute.
I just got a question that came across the bottom. Were there any Christmas seals designed by famous artists? Well, one of them is Howard Pyle. He designed the 1908 seal. He was a very famous painter and book illustrator. He was with the Wyeths. He was in the same studio with the Wyeths. Andrew Wyeth, Jamie Wyeth, they all had studios in Chadds Ford, and he was part of that group. And he designed the first seal, the second seal. He was contracted by Emily Bissell to do that.
You see this?
I have seen that, yes.
And the interest is in 1908 seal.
Yeah,
Can you backtrack to that?
yes, I think we can. Can we go back to it?
If you can go back to it, the question centers around, whoops,
Okay.
Further.
1908.
Yeah. Yeah, this is 1908. This is what Howard Pyle designed.
I'm looking for, there's another one that has an envelope rather than the seal. Is that happen to be in the, I thought I saw one 1908 with an envelope and an address.
Go ahead and
Let me see.
advance. Let's see if I can find. No,
Now, there's one printed on the back, but that was,
that was in
different-
1919, though.
Yeah.
That one printed on the back was an experimental envelope that never made it.
Okay, I'm sorry.
What happened was when they released this to national, tried to make this a national charity, that 1908 is when they tried to do it. And when they released this, a lot of little variants occurred. Variants in the design, variants in the gum, variants in the way they were separated. This one on the bottom is rouletted. The one on the top is a compound perth 14 by 12. You could never find all of the types that there are connected with 1908. Just a myriad.
If you would, Paul, can you blow up the lower envelope, please? Is there a way to expand that?
That's about it.
The curiosity that crops up is that the envelope was canceled and apparently delivered, but it doesn't tell you where it was delivered. So my question is, does this make it rare that you can actually track this without a city designation?
It's a local.
Yeah, to me,
You
these are
mean-
locals. Both of these are locals. Oh, there's no doubt
But
about
does that
They
mean
were
the
restricted.
postmaster, the postmaster at that area allowed this to go through? How do you catch that? I'm off the subject. I'm sorry.
I don't know, but I know that these two were restricted to locations on the West Coast. And they took the design that Howard Pyle made. And then what they did is they printed it on different papers, used different perforations, rouletting, and everything like that. I couldn't tell you very much about where this got delivered or how it was canceled. In those days, they would cancel these. There was no problem with that. And a lot of things got through in that generation.
Thank you.
Stan, just to clarify, if you can see the postmark on either of those, they are delivered locally within the same city. It's very common use of the time frame.
Yeah, I think so.
Okay,
I
Like
think
Yeah,
they're
that's
local.
Yeah.
I think when you see something like that, a scarcity like that, it's a local. Let me look
Yeah.
and see.
You also had the famous artist Rockwell Kentwood in 1939
Yeah,
issue.
yeah.
And I didn't see it there with your 1918, but did you also have the brochures that come with it?
No, I don't have any. I have some of that in the later years. I have, you know, my presentation ends at 1919. And
Okay.
I have some of those where they mailed it out and they had a letter with it. I have a bunch of those letters. I'll have to dig them up and maybe we can put that in this next presentation.
You don't have it for the 1918?
No, I don't.
Send Paul your address. I'll send you. I got several.
Do you? Oh,
Jim has
okay.
everything. Yep. Send me your
Well,
address. Stan.
I'll tell you what, Paul, I want to send you a Christmas card that I'm going to make up with the obvious ornamentation that's
Okay.
going to go on it. Because I know this lady in Odessa, in the post office, she will cancel by instruction. You know, not every postal clerk is willing to do that, but she is willing to do it. And I will send that to you and get
Share that
this.
with the club. Yeah.
You'll
And
get
then,
it in a delivery envelope.
Interesting.
Yeah, I don't have any of those. I don't.
Yeah, got one coming.
Okay,
But Paul,
Jim,
send me the
thank you.
address.
Okay. I'll
Thank
get
you.
that. And Stan, you send it to me. I'll send it to Jim and we'll be good.
okay, I will
couple
send it
questions.
to that and Paul, you send me your address.
Okay. And a couple questions, remarks from Bob he sent as the chat.
Well,
He said-
I can, Paul, I can ask directly. If you
Okay.
can forward to about slide number 23 or thereabouts, 1911.
We have Greg to thank for the numbers on these.
20.
This is 1911.
1911 type 5 you
Yes.
referenced.
That's off the cover of Seal News.
Just click on the slide, Paul, and it'll go full
The
screen.
one with Seal News.
Yeah. That's as close as I ever got to that. But since I know there are 5 types, I wanted to share with everybody what the 5 types were. And this one is really rare.
Well, you mentioned that it's not listed in a catalog. So of course, the first thing I had to do is go to the catalog. And 2022 under Christmas seals, there's a WX9B type 5 for 1911.
Well, Bob, that shows you where my catalog is these days. I don't have a current specialized catalog. Well, I'm glad that Scott is awakened to this because the real scarce items are the things they didn't list in the other.
The good news is that it's got a valuation of 2,700 unused. The better news is it's unvalued on cover. So the challenge is find one on cover.
Oh, I doubt you'd find it. I honestly doubt that it's ever been used. I think that what we're looking at is part of one roll of these that got out. And as a matter of fact, I think I know some background story for that. I think that somebody in New York, where these were being printed, they were stashed away as junk. And when they sold the property, I believe that some people went in and found some of these. I don't know whether they knew what they were looking at when they found them, but they are extremely rare.
Well, and then the previous slides that you mentioned, types 3 and 4, on cover, those are also valued. I think you had one of those, right?
Yeah, I've got type 2 and I do not have type 3 on a cover. I do have type 4, but it's not tied.
That's the one I was looking at also. That's also in Scott now.
Okay.
That one is a really rare. Just out of curiosity, Bob, what value did they place on that seal?
WX9A on cover, type 4 on cover, $1,500.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that when I gave up, I probably dropped out when it got to about 100. That's probably when I dropped out of the bidding. I was sure that cover that I saw where that seal was tied brought $1,000.
Yeah.
Cool.
And Bob, you mentioned that the Layman's cover owner is well known to many of us.
Well, his handle on lots of different places is Shield Man, if that helps. I'm not sure, since you're recording, if I want to have that go out on
No,
the air.
I don't blame you. I think, and then there's
Well
a
known to
question.
lots of us who collects 319 Shield.
Okay. And question from Cynthia. Are you here, Cynthia? Because this question might need some clarification. How long were the Christmas seals used?
Well, they're still being used. I get them from year to year. I don't think there's anything much collectible past, the 51 or 52. I've got a bunch of things that I'll show that I think are collectible because of the dates they were canceled. For example, canceled on Christmas Day, possibly imperfect pairs. I've got some proofs that are canceled on cover. But beyond that, there isn't much. That the seals themselves have almost no value.
Yeah.
I mean, they're all, unless you find some error, the seal itself just has almost no value past the 30s.
Yeah, the club received a box in one of our donations, probably 8-9 inches thick of seals, Sheets, Wheat Ridge, Boys Town, and we sold a lot of them at our sale this summer. And then we had a bourse, and then one of our members came and bought several of them. I bought some, but yeah, it's like first day covers. It's all in the eye of the beholder.
Right, it is. And I saw some of those Wheat Ridge full sheets of them one time. They apparently had been in a damp place. They were frozen together like a block.
Bricks.
They were just absolutely useless. I mean, you could soak them off, but seal collectors are getting like stamp collectors. They're very particular about the gum, and you see in these auctions that I look at, say, oh, it's never hinged. When did anybody care about whether or not a Christmas seal was hinged?
Yeah. Question, the second one for 1907 issue, which included the New Year, what month did that come out? Was it just before Christmas or just before New Year's?
The second one was before New Year's.
Before New Year's,
Now,
okay.
That's what makes the type 2 so much scarcer than type 1, is that its circulation was limited.
And Christmas cards are over.
Yeah.
Okay.
And that particular one, I know I can send you the article where I learned what the background was for the Layman cover. That was bought in London.
Wow.
It was, but what it was is he bought it from a stamp dealer in London. And the reason I think it got to London is the cover itself was mailed to Amsterdam. So it was in Europe, and it must have come out of accumulations that were on the continent, ended up in a dealer's stock in London. The dealer did not know what he was looking at. And what I think I heard was it went for 80 pounds. That was the original purchase price.
When was that?
And then the cover was turned over and sold at auction, and it brought, well, with fees, it brought $3,000.
Okay.
It's nothing like that has ever been found again. that's the only example of two of them tied on the same card that is known.
Yeah.
And, you know, it's fun to look at my Emily Bissell cover with both of those tied on there, but it does not measure up at all.
I think the only reason that a lot of this ephemera is worth money is because people threw it out.
But,
You know,
yeah,
The
that's right.
baseball cards that my mother threw out when I went into service are probably worth a lot more money, you know. But
That's exactly what happens is nobody knows how much of it is around. And it's just, it's so limited now, especially this stuff from the 20s, the 30s,
Mhm,
and the cards from the 20s and the early 30s are just impossible to find with tied seals on them.
Yeah, I think it's the emphasis from the postcard to the Christmas card.
Yeah.
And you might be
Yeah.
like, you know, more likely to save a postcard, but not the envelope that your Christmas card came in.
That is exactly right. And I told Greg Ajamian that I probably wrecked more cards and covers as a kid because I soaked everything off of everything. I
Yeah,
soaked the
that's weird.
seals off. I soaked 3-cent definitives off. I had the greatest accumulation of 3-cent used definitives that anybody ever tried to corner that market. And how worthwhile is that?
Hey, they're giving it away now. They're selling it in the magazines for half price.
I know. I mean, all of us use postage we get from dealers and from auctions where they tell you what the face value is. They don't bother to tell you what the catalog value is anymore. The face value is this.
People contact me as a club, the rep and stuff, and through APS, they have a collection to sell. And they have all this old postage. There's Elvis and, you know, Herbert Hoover and stuff. I said, I use stamps that are over 100 years old on my, you know, and how much did you pay for them? I said, probably face value, if that.
Stan, while I have the catalog open, there are values in the catalog for Christmas seals on cover, but I don't see a single value for a used Christmas seal.
No, once it's off the cover, it's not the same. It's not the same once it's off the cover. If it's on the card or the cover and you can see the cancel distinctly and you can see the date, that's what they want to see. They want it to be used in the appropriate period. And so the argument then was that ensued was, what is the appropriate period? And somebody came up with the 12 days of Christmas. That's the appropriate period of use for a seal.
Makes sense.
On the 1918 seal, my members in the club don't realize that I have an interest in World War I, so I have two related questions. Today, I got my second set of Christmas seals, and it started out talking about COVID and how active the Tuberculosis Society, American Lung Association is. And in 1918, you know, with the soldiers coming home, there are many coming home with the lung disease, with the pandemic and stuff. And I don't know if it's a question as much as a comment. I would think that they would want to make money to go to help that, you know.
Yeah. I think that the reason the 1918 seals got so scarce is they didn't want to compete with that other charity. And so there was very limited distribution of sheets. And that's why the fully perforated one is so impossible to find. I've only seen one at auction once in the last, 50 years.
A sheet, a whole sheet?
No, a single, perforated all around. See, it isn't going to qualify as something that came out of the scarce sheet unless it's perforated all around.
Yeah.
And what you see, if you took it out of a booklet pane, you're going to see a straight edge. You might see a roulette, but you will not see it perforated all four sides.
Mm-hmm.
And that's
it's Jim here. That's because the piece I'm sending you, it's from the Red Cross. It says no seals sold in 1918.
Right.
Only
only the booklet panes for the most part.
only the
were
booklet
sold.
panes.
And there are two different, you know, there's one rouletted, one perforated, but they all have straight edges.
Right.
So, and you can't,
Around the outside, yeah.
Yeah, I did see in auction at the Christmas Seal and Charity Stamp Society. I didn't bid on it, but I did see a fully perforated 1918. I don't know which type it was, but I did see one.
I wonder if somebody doctored the edge with the,
You
with the coil on.
probably, that, you know, anytime you can make a scarce collectible out of a cheap stamp, you can be sure there are going to be frauds out there. I mean, this dealer, I bought that fraudulent 1907 cover from. He maintained for sure this was real. I said, oh, it can't possibly be real. There wasn't any of these canceled out of the Delaware Valley in Philadelphia. The furthest they got away was Mechanicsburg. This couldn't possibly be real. Oh, he says, yeah, but look, this is really clean cover. Even
On the locals, did you, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
On the locals, did you ever see the dental stamps?
I have some dental stamps. Yeah, I have some. I'm thinking that I may somewhere have one of them on a cover.
Can you show me what you have on the varieties? Because I found what I have over there. It's in, I didn't realize it was in this one area.
You just muted.
Can't hear you.
I can't. I didn't catch most of that.
Whoever it was,
Just
try
put
it
your
again.
finger, yeah, just put your finger on the space bar and that's like opening your mic up. You don't have to click to your mic signal.
Well, while they're recovering, my last question is on the design. You know, as the war was ending, you know, it was hard to tell who was going to win until right up at the end. You know, versus World War II. But
Yeah.
the fact that it was a Statue of Liberty, do you think that had any relationship, you know, being considered, or was this just luck because they had to have such a long lead time? And
You know, Paul, I don't know. I don't know what motivated them to pick any design. I think one of the most frustrating things of all is the 1913 Type 1, which shouldn't even be in existence, somehow got away from the people who were making decision. And I thought they were sworn to some kind of integrity about this.
yeah.
And that's the only reason that it came out is somebody lifted it and took it out and then sold it and then decided this is going to be something good. I'll sell these.
Or some collector just did it for themselves, passed on. Somebody, you know, went through the stuff, found it, said, this is worth it. And I have a question from Stephen. He said, is the Emily Bissell slide number 11, is this a rare cover?
No, Emily Bissell covers. It may be that it's very difficult to find an Emily Bissell cover that has both of these canceled on it.
Yeah, I have some of
That
these.
could be a pretty scarce cover.
But this itself.
I have a collection of Emily Bissell covers, and I will show you next spring. That's when we're talking about doing this again. I will show you what I have. I stumbled across this, and I don't remember where I got it. It's a really nice cover. And what I do with these is when I have a seal with disturbed gum, that's what I'm going to use to put on the envelope.
I personally am always looking for things like this that are stamps that are signed or autographed by Stephen.
Oh, and this one is, right?
Right, this one's autographed by Stephen, and I'm not positive, but I believe the 1943 Christmas seal was actually designed by Stephen, and that's why I was
really?
asking earlier if you knew who all designed, you know, any artist or whatever. I know Stephen did at least one, and of course he did close to 30 American stamps, but only one Christmas seal that I know of.
I'm looking at Scott's, it's right below the 1943 that you mentioned, Stephen. It says designer, Andre Dugo.
Okay, then it might be 42, 44. It was during
It
the
should be in
second.
the catalog. The Scott catalog has the designer in it, I believe.
Was an off a year,
Yeah,
Stephen, it is 1941.
41.
41. Okay.
Yeah, and the White Ace albums also gives a story of each of the earlier seals, even production and the money it made.
Yeah, the money it made.
Designer, yeah, very good.
You know, the person, I was going to wait to share this with you, but some of these first day covers, the people who designed the cachet, they didn't realize that the seal that they were putting was, and they called it the first seal, was actually the second. And it was actually in the cachet. And I'll show you these when I put that together. I thought it was kind of peculiar that the person designing the cachet didn't know the difference between the one on the left and the one on the right.
We're really going to
That
look
would
forward to
be
that.
interesting.
You're good.
Yeah,
Other questions, folks?
Yeah,
Paul?
just not a comment, but mint stuck stamps together. I've done this, never done it with Christmas seals, sorry. Put them in a baggie, seal the baggie good, take the air out, throw it in your freezer. Wait 2 days, take it out, let it come to room, and the stamps come apart.
Well, the ones I saw that were solid as a brick, they didn't get that treatment.
Yeah. Using the foundation. There's a question, somebody?
Paul, I just noticed that you said you collect 1918. A quick glance at the calendar says there's 17 varieties of that Christmas seal.
Yeah, well,
5 of them have dashes.
okay. Well, like I said, I just gave away 2 of them. The lady joined our club with the 2 sons. I sent each of the kids a set of stamps from 1918 to about the 1970s. And I wish I waited a few days to check them for perforations. Who would have known? Well, it'll pay for the school. You know, I'll have to let them know that. So thanks, Bob. Other questions or comments? This has been great. It's been lively. I enjoyed it. We had a good turnout. And what we'll do then, we'll turn it over to, I'll take this off. Anything that anybody wants to see before we go? Okay.